All right, I'm super excited to invite for episode 4 of Banging Rocks TV, Brandon Howard. Brandon, you do all kinds of really amazing work. I'm looking forward to having a chance to dig in and talk about what it is you do, but also why you do it and kind of what you've been up to and how all of that's going. So
Yeah,
if you want, maybe start by telling people just a little bit about who you are.
sure. So hi everybody, I'm Brandon Howard. I currently live in Los Angeles in Burbank, California. I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina. Went to school at Brown University, worked in entertainment for MTV and HBO. Then I worked in finance for McGraw-Hill. And yeah, it's sort of like, it's a bit of a life journey just in terms of why I bounced from all those places and how I got here. I guess a quick recap. I guess I was born in Syracuse. I was living in Brooklyn. This was the early 80s. And the story that I get from my parents was that New York was becoming a questionable place to live in the 80s. There was just a lot of, I don't know if you want to call it tension or racism or just the need to clean up the city according to a mayor's perspective. But we moved to South Carolina, which was maybe worse. I loved my time in South Carolina as I was going through it, and I found my time at Brown to be really eye-opening, and just in terms of being around almost a completely different perspective. And so, and really it was not really knowing what was going on, just going through life and following all the guidelines. And it was a back injury that I experienced at the age of 30. I was training for a half marathon, just trying to get in shape for my wedding, and 2 herniated discs while I was on the treadmill. And maybe one of them ruptured. It felt like, lava pouring down my spine. And that kind of led to just a lot of self-exploration, just dealing with the pain and wondering what was causing it and where it came from. I played college basketball. In South Carolina, my high school court was actually made out of concrete. So I bounced off of that for 4 years. And and we thought it was a physical problem. The doctors didn't want to give me surgery. They put me on pain meds and physical therapy. And it really just drove me mad. I don't think I had ever been like that upset with anybody. It was actually at Coachella. Me and my wife were walking around Coachella, and I was as grumpy as I had ever been in my entire life. And after that point, I think that's when I started to truly burn out at work. I think burnout was leading to it. I was in the finance sector. I went in sort of naively thinking that every company and every business was designed to make the world a better place. And I wasn't feeling that. It was more of just recognizing what really motivates people. And, it's Wall Street. Like, I'm not mad at anybody for being greedy or thinking about money first. It's just sort of, how our society has developed, and, recognizing, and we'll probably get to this later, but sort of just recognizing what's guiding the mentality of groups and societies and cultures and countries. It's no wonder we're experiencing what we're experiencing. But for me, having to deal with this like 5 years ago has kind of prepared me for this current situation. So yeah, it's been an adventure, and I could probably dig into some details more if you want. But ultimately, it was that back pain and the healthcare industry not really providing me the comfort that I was looking for, and having to decide. I had just had a newborn baby. My son was, only a few months old, and it hurt my back to pick him up. It hurt my back to hold him. It hurt my back to change his diaper, and all of that was just, it starts to mess with your head. All your thoughts are negative. And that was triggering more back pain. The physical part hurt, but somehow my emotions were making my back hurt. And that was kind of like the revelation point for me. I started to research if that was even possible for my emotions or my thoughts to impact my pain. And then I learned about the endocrine system and how, hormones don't happen when you're a teenager. They happen every moment of every day that you have an emotional experience. Even if you don't have one, it's probably just because all your emotions have sort of been in balance. But to understand that, we have these emotional categories, and I can get into the categories if it's that time for the conversation. But for me, it was, once I realized that emotions were a thing and that the endocrine system was releasing these hormones that from different parts of your body, like all the different glands that you have and how they were connected to organs. And, that led me down several different rabbit holes. One was, growing up in the South, it's the Bible Belt. And so anything beyond that is, it was the 80s, the 90s. So it was a lot of pre-internet time. There's not a lot else. But when I came across like Vedic scriptures and discussions about chakras, I was like, well, that's intriguing. Like, my emotions are impacting me, and here's a whole category of emotions. So I wanted to understand that and validate it and figure out, how reliable was this source of information. And I saw that, on the Western side, if we just jump to that part of it, I came across color therapy, or color psychology rather. And that talked about how specific, people react to have emotional reactions to different colors. And for me, I remember never liking rooms that were painted yellow. Even as an adult moving into a house, I'm like, we're not painting the wall yellow. Like, let's paint it right now. I don't want it. And yellow happens to be associated with anxiety. And so whatever reason, I always felt a little weird in rooms with yellow. But, growing up in the South where people tend to, everybody's always trying to tell you how to grow up. Everybody's trying to give you ideas and directions and what to do. And, back then, a lot of that was just like, be quiet, listen, don't speak. I would ask questions and get laughed at. So I stopped asking questions. I would ask questions and ask for, fairness or support or whatever. And you get a lot of like, the world's not fair, get over it. And so that led me to just sort of like holding everything in. And, I was also like a really emotional kid. Like, I hated striking out, playing sports. I always wanted to win. So a lot of it was, as an adult, realizing how I was sort of trapping all my emotions. And seems like breaking my back, if that's not too extreme, really opened up a lot of the emotions that I was like holding in that spot. And they say like the lower back has a lot to do with, concerns about money or concerns about, mental, emotional and support. And, there's other emotions and they fit in different places, but I found that when I get to a place in a perspective where I recognize that there is way more support than I was initially observing, the pain goes away. When you can shift your perspective, you stop releasing those hormones and the inflammation goes down. And then you just start to experience less of what was driving you mad. On occasion, new things pop up. And ultimately, for me, it's been all about just navigating emotions. I wish it was easier. I really do. I invented an app to make it as easy as possible, and I use it because it helps. If I can stay mellow and balanced even on a bad day, like we talked before this meeting started, today was not a good day. And you find ways to navigate and to have that perspective of emotions are temporary, and you can always move on. So we're all facing challenges, and the entrepreneurial challenge is real. The African American challenge is real. The dad of 2 kids during COVID is real. And, and with all that going on, who's got room for excuses? So emotional balance has been sort of an inspiring North Star for me. And I've found a lot of people that have also wanted to take that path. And here we are.
Yeah, no, and I mean, one of the things I find amazing is, so many people, you can look at a Scientific American article or a scripture and say like, huh, that's neat. But then for you, it's more than that. It was like, okay, there's something here. And then it's like digging and digging and uncovering, and then kind of the mixture of like, it sounds like a lot of embodying in your own life, but then beyond that, wanting to look at, well, okay, this is something that if this is good for you, like how can that reach out further and be impacting other people? You mentioned the app that you've made. Do you want to tell a little bit about that?
Sure. So when I first found out that I was going to have to come up with my own solution for my back pain, and I saw that emotions were an element, I was looking into I was looking at everything, and ultimately I was trying to figure out, is there a way for me to like make my discs in my back grow back? You know, all the medical science out there was like, they're not growing back. You're gonna have to put something fake in there that'll help. And when they denied me surgery, I'm like, well, what do I get? What's my option? So I immediately gravitated to this concept of vibration, and vibration seemed to be this concept that everything in the world vibrates at a certain frequency. And so while I have yet to figure out exactly what frequency my disc will grow back to, I did come across a lot of like really interesting facts about sound. And one, I mentioned how the Vedic scriptures talk about chakras, and one of the connections to sound there was that you'll see a lot of monks sing and chant and hum to create a specific vibration within their body. And they change that frequency or the pitch of their hum. And as they do that, it hits different organs in their body. And they do that, from my understanding, to maintain that monk-like calmness, because the benefit of that calmness is, one, you're not filling your body with toxins that, you know, eventually lead to inflammation, that eventually lead to chronic pain, that eventually lead to chronic diseases. So they can avoid all that, live longer, live happier, live more mellow. And I needed to find a way to do that in this society. I couldn't, you know, with a kid, trust me, that crossed my mind. I'd love to go live in a monastery. Maybe I did it in a past life. I probably did. And so trying to figure out a way to find that balance at any time, at any given moment. And that sort of gravitated to this concept of mindfulness on demand. And that's the slogan that we use for Euphoria. So it started off with me just downloading a binaural beat generator and calculating my own frequencies. I was coming across websites that list tons of frequencies and their benefits. I was also looking into, you know, other ways that sounds could produce these frequencies. And I saw that, you know, one of there's the solfeggio scale, which is magical and requires way more science. And the little bit of science I've seen on it has been very impressive. But the solfeggio scale, it's also associated with those chakras and those emotional groups. And that part of it was very important for me, because there's another piece that I want to explain, and I'll tie it in a second. So the first thing that I came across, maybe even before the chakras, was that being asleep, relaxed, or in a state of meditation all have these medical benefits. And for me, sleeping and relaxing is super, you know, easy. It's fun for me. Meditating was challenging, especially with the back pain. And so I wanted to figure out a way to stay in that meditative state or get into that meditative state. And I saw that there's this concept called binaural beats. And binaural beats are essentially a way to get your brain to vibrate at a frequency that it wants to get to anyway. So when we sleep, we're in the state called delta, and you can measure the brainwave patterns with a variety of EEG devices. But ultimately, the frequency band for sleep is like super low, like, you know, 1 hertz, 2 hertz. And then you can get into delta, theta, alpha, beta and gamma. And so with all these different frequency bands, those are like states of consciousness. So I want to be asleep. I want to relax. I want to meditate. I want to improve my mood. I want to self-motivate. I want to focus. Like, you can like just turn the volume up on a frequency device. And as you go up, you'll go through these states. So creating those states with binaural beats just means that you listen to one tone in this ear and a slightly different tone in the other ear. And the measurement between those differences are what creates the binaural beat. So if you want to try an experiment at home, if you drop 2 slightly different pebbles into a pond or a bathtub or a body of water, and you see the ripples collide, if those 2 pieces are slightly different, you'll see a third wave. And that third wave is like a physical example for a binaural beat. So when I realized I could create binaural beats, the second challenge was, how can I make them as healthy as possible? Most binaural beats come with you can create them with any tone that you want. However, I was starting to wonder, are there good tones? Are there bad tones? What's the healthiest tone I could use? And that's how I came across the solfeggio scale. So with those two things combined, I started using it myself. Can I put myself in a meditative state? And I was like, oh, well, it seems like I'm here, according to all the science, I'm here. And like the way I feel, it's like I'm feeling very zen. I surprised myself the first time I did it. I was like, I didn't know I could feel like that calm at work. It made work way more tolerable. And so combining those things, I was doing a lot of calculations on the fly. And I realized that, maybe I could just put it in a spreadsheet. So I started to just do all those calculations and just have a place I could reference. And it was working on me. I was sharing it with other people. I wanted to explore if it could turn into a product. And I did that because the feedback I was getting was so powerful and confirming. And so I went through that process of trying to figure out how to make an app. Had to go a friends and family round, which was challenging and time consuming, but it did work out, and that helped me create Euphoria. I only had enough funding to get it on iOS, and I've been fundraising to get it on Android and every other device ever since. And the feedback has been awesome. We just published our first white paper on the results that we've had. The app was launched in 2017, and we've had over 36,000 downloads. Most of them have been by word of mouth. So thank you for anybody listening who's been sharing it with their friends and family. The feedback has been positive. What we do with the app is, after, if I can explain it real quick, you download it on iOS, and it asks you 3 questions. The first one is, how do you want to feel? And so you click on that first option, it'll take you to a list of all the different emotions that we have. And then and they're organized by chakra and sort of emotional category. So you can even identify, like, if I feel negative in this particular, if I'm in this mood and it's negative, there's an example of what you can shift to, like the more positive emotions you can shift to. And the more I've done this, the more my friends have done this. Like, people have used it to improve, like to get over colds and flus. People have used it for chemotherapy and pain management. People have used it for recovery during sports. And so again, like sleeping, relaxing, meditating, focusing, like being able to get into the mind state that you need to be in for the activity that you're doing. I think that has even more to do with how well you do at that than and really just lowering your head and getting through it. I think that we can eventually talk about how our minds, our souls are like magnets, and our thoughts trigger what we get drawn to and what gets drawn to us. And so as an athlete who was very pretty much in it for the wrong reasons, I use it as like a social ladder to like get past like all the stress of the South. I used it to like get into school, into college, and I was miserable the whole time. Like, I didn't like running, I didn't like exercising. I like doing well at the sport, and that's why I stuck with it. But I think that when you're exercising or when you're doing something and there's frustration there, you're just building like a resistance that you're unaware of. And I've tried to take a more positive approach to everything, and it's it's changed my life. I have less stress. There's still stress. There's plenty of stress. Being an entrepreneur doesn't really exclude you from stress, but I do feel like I've been able to stick it out longer because I've had something to help me manage the emotions. Before I even got into building the app, I heard entrepreneurs, you have a good idea, you share it, and then everything works out. My path has been more challenging than I expected, in that it wasn't until COVID kicked in that I heard that only African Americans get 1% of the investment in the US. So I was like, had I known that? But in any case, like, the app has been out, it's been helping people. it's hard for me to tell how many people it's helped or how often people use it. I can look at stats, but it's still an anonymous app, and I think people like it that way. Ultimately, we have a lot of ideas for, and people have given us a lot of feedback and thoughts on what they want the app to do next. And, honestly, I have more confidence in the power of sound than I have in my ability to help everybody receive all that it can give. So my goal is to just push it as far as I can. And with people's support, it can go as far as we want it to go. There's just a lot of research out there talking about how we can use sound and vibration to address a lot of everything. I mean, a lot of the problems we face are just based off of the fact that people have to make decisions under stress. And if people can operate from a calmer, more central place, then better decisions get made, better products get made, better laws get made, and we can find more efficient ways to keep more people healthy and happy. That's what's driving me, and it's also the source of what frustrates me when you see so many inefficiencies in healthcare and industry and so on and so forth. So.
It's interesting how, the binaural beats themselves, and let me know if I'm understanding it right, but I think the way that that's working, as you described, is sort of, you have those two different frequencies that different ears are hearing, and that your mind has to sort of make that third wave. So it sort of interprets and creates that, and in the process, that starts to shift sort of your mental frequencies as well.
Yeah, that's definitely a great way to explain it. What I've come across, and to add to that, is the brain has this feature called sympathetic vibration. And so that means that if it's exposed to a vibration like outside, then it'll eventually like vibrate at that same frequency to have that effect. So what binaural beats do is the sounds cross through your ears, and it creates that third wave in the middle of your brain. So it essentially syncs up the two hemispheres, and you start to use and balance both sides of your brain for the decision-making process. So there's a lot of explanations out there, whether it's the left side being masculine and the right side being feminine, the left side being analytical and the right side being creative. And I think that if we make a decision only using our left brain, then we have to evolve that level of thinking to either be analytical and creative, or we just got to get creative to get around that. And ultimately, when you can think outside of the realm that created the problem, you can create solutions. So yeah, being able to create, we deal with a lot of people with insomnia, and obviously if you don't get enough rest, then your next day you're pretty lethargic, your decisions are tougher, and everything else. So the binaural beats will say like, all right, I want to go into sleep mode. So we'll create that vibration of sleep, and then your brain will eventually sync up with that and you'll be able to go to sleep. The advantage of Euphoria is, and this is my mom's favorite, is that if you choose to feel bliss and rejuvenation when you wake up in the morning, then you've set that intention. And this is really what Euphoria is about, is setting the intention. And when people set the intention, they get to where they're going. Euphoria can help you set that intention and then help you hold it for as long as you want it, and get back to that whenever you feel like you need it again. So it's really like an intention driving machine, or a process to help you recognize when you're in a mindset you don't want to be in, and you want to shift to one that is likely going to be more advantageous for you. So that's why I created the app the way I did. I don't even think I finished explaining how the app works. So yeah, jumping back to that part, first you choose how you want to feel, then you choose what attribute you want to boost. So again, like each chakra, energy channel, gland, part of our body can help us, whether you want to boost your vitality or boost your love or boost your wisdom or your self-expression. Like these are all, areas of your body that you can ask to do more of what you want. I think that a lot of people limit what they can do out of fear. And we want Euphoria to empower people to reach those emotions, those states of consciousness that they've always wanted, and overcome the ones that they've already recognized have limited their potential. So you can choose an attribute to boost. And then the last question is your activity level. That's where the binaural beat part kicks in. And do you want to feel that way while you sleep, relax, meditate, etc. And so once you choose those options, you press play. I always recommend listening with headphones. The effects are faster. And then you're good to go for as long as you want to listen.
That's great. And I mean, I love, metaphorically, there's so many neat pieces there where, you know, as you describe it, part of what you're trying to do with it is have those ripples go out. And it's like the little changes in each person who's able to sort of shift a little bit, that has this emergent change on everything that we do societally. And those ripples of sound are such a perfect metaphor for that, as well as that piece. I mean, it's fun how deep the metaphor goes there. Of, you know, you have those two different frequencies and the third one comes out, and so much of what you're talking about there is also getting to that, like, that third option, that third place that seems like it sometimes is indiscernible.
Yeah. Sometimes that third option is the new idea that you needed. Yeah, so it's been surprising. Like, a lot of this stuff I continue to understand and recognize the potential more and more. You know, there's just so much to explore within the human body. Like, you assume the healthcare industry has figured it all out until you get there and they're like, nope, still working on that.
Yeah.
So I am seeing a big push from a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people that go through tough times and overcome them. A lot of us, you know, we gravitate to the wellness industry with our ideas and what's worked for us, and we just want to share it with other people. And you know, in the wellness space, the motivating factor is really, you know, can we fix the problems around us? Is there a better way? Is there a solution that's more effective, less side effects? And we have to explore these, because the treatments that we got tended to make us worse, or we didn't experience what we wanted to experience. And so it's really, it's just been fascinating meeting so many people with so many approaches. There's so many ways to feel better. And I mean, if you just wanted to think, if you could just use your awareness to just think better, to just want to feel better, you could do it without any other supplement or product. Everything that we're coming up with is just an approach that can get you closer to where you want to be. These products seem to be gravitating towards people that want to do that themselves, versus people who haven't reached the point where they feel like they need to explore it. And that's probably what concerns me the most, is just realizing how much our stress leads to cancer and death. And so it's like, America has this culture. I don't know what it's like in Canada, but I really feel like I'd rather be there right now. But ultimately, we overlook stress like it's supposed to be there, like it's natural. And stress does motivate us and move us. I think that maybe, at least I was unaware that it could lead to parts of my body not functioning, or excessive amounts of pain, or things that can ultimately kill you. And my dad died of cancer, and I thought it was just the Wendy's hamburgers, and it might have been. But you know, there's just a lot of stress, and I was raised to, you know, suck it up, man up. And I'm sure that was my dad's approach, and there wasn't any explanation for how he got the cancer or where it came from. But for me, looking back and seeing what I know now, you know, we just dealt with stress. We just sucked it up and ignored it. And for me personally, that's not how I want to go out.
Yeah. Well, and when you say, like, I mean, that phrase, even, just suck it up, because that's what we do. We suck it up. And then it's like, it's in us like a sponge if we don't figure out what to do with that.
I don't know who originated the quote, but whoever said the issue is in the tissues was definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I'll throw in for anybody that wants to research this stuff, I mentioned the psychology of color is definitely relevant. I'd also recommend Hans Selye, as he explains how stress works in the body, and that whole process of thoughts turning into irregular cell activity. So highly recommend going down that rabbit hole.
Great, thank you. No, that's great. And any references like that you want, we can throw those in as links at the end of the description for the YouTube video as well. I wanted to ask, I mean, typically one of the questions that I like to ask is kind of like, what's the journey been like to here? But you touched on three pieces that are interesting, trying to interleave those. I mean, one is just the whole entrepreneurial journey on its own. And then there's the entrepreneurial journey as a dad of two kids and trying to make those things work together. And then that piece of being, you know, a Black man in America and on that journey of both of those pieces with that as a core element that's there as well. And I'd love to hear, like, what's this been like?
I might have to write that down. I just live it. So help me recap that real fast. There's the African American story, is the entrepreneurial story, and then the dad story.
Yeah, and all those pieces having to fit together.
Yeah. No, it's a walk in the park. Where do I start? So the entrepreneurial journey is, I described it earlier in a conversation today. It felt like walking through the desert on an overcast night and day. Like there's no sun, there's no stars. You have zero idea what direction you're headed. You don't know what's going to work out. And eventually you gotta pick a spot. Maybe you pick a hill that can help you see the distance a little bit. But, you know, when I shifted to a more positive mindset, then I felt like, and you know, you start to trust your intuition and the world around you. And for me, that felt like being on a sailboat on an overcast night and day. Like at least something's pushing me. I still don't know where I'm going. But you try to, you know, when you're studying consciousness, you eventually connect with this concept of manifestation. And that really connected with me, like being able to hold a thought that I want and then figure out if I can get there. And the challenge of feeling what that's like in order to magnetize yourself to that situation. Growing up African American in the US, in the South, with parents who had a Northeastern perspective, it's kind of like knowing that the way people respond to you is based off of a significant level of unawareness. And being able to accept people for who they are and the thoughts that they have and not let it overwhelm you. I definitely had days where I was super overwhelmed in high school, in middle school, you know, getting picked on, bullies, you know, feeling socially unaccepted, you know, having wants and desires that, you know, everybody tells you that you're not going to get or you shouldn't want. And so you wind up having to just, you swallow the doubts, you swallow the naysayers. It was interesting. I learned that most people or in the educational curriculum, my generation, and I claim millennial, thanks. I claim to be one of the oldest. Yeah. We were taught, self-confidence. I was unaware that that wasn't a part of the curriculum in older generations. So it's like this awareness that, like, no matter what anybody else says, I'm supposed to believe in myself. And you do that all through every competitive or challenging obstacle that you face. And I always just held on to it. And so, and it was tough, like the 90s. Like, I love rap, I love hip hop. And but like Ice Cube's quote, I say it all the time, like if you're not from the ghetto, don't ever come to the ghetto, because you wouldn't understand it. And I grew up in the suburbs, and in South Carolina, like there is those neighborhoods, those pockets. Obviously, this is where like COVID is like extreme, but these under supported neighborhoods, they didn't want anything to do with me. And then I felt like I was also like in my own neighborhoods, somewhat isolated. So I felt like I caught slack from both sides of the track. And that quote I took from Eminem, because he, you know, to hear somebody with his complexion talk about, you know, feeling isolated the same way that I felt, you know, I gravitated to it. But it also created like, you know, another societal divide in terms of people that I could connect to or people I couldn't connect to. And so now as an African American, you know, I'm older and I'm past a lot of like the young BS and that a lot of us go through. It's like, you know, when you grow up a basketball player listening to hip hop in America, you kind of have to be tough. I felt obligated to live out to every expectation and what's the word? Just assumption, stereotype. So it's like I had to live all of them, even if it wasn't me. And dropping that has been a healthy perspective. I haven't tested it much now that I'm in COVID, but ultimately, it's really challenging to try to like have the persona that you think you're supposed to have, and then figuring out who you actually are and how you want to be. Like, I would probably prefer to do this interview like Snoop would, but I've got to be this, you know, the CEO that people want to invest in and create a company. But during that whole time, and I think that there's a huge problem with entrepreneurship, in that there's so many high expectations put on young entrepreneurs and business developers, because money has become such a powerful and important thing. The people that have it want to use it as intelligently as possible. They want to turn it into more, and I get that. However, I think that there's a trend, at least in the finance space, where it's all about like short, quick, immediate, large returns. And, you know, it feels like a really large piece of the problem. And it feels like it comes down to patience. It comes down to fear. People don't want to wait, and they want to avoid fear at all costs because fear is driving their fear of fear. And so it's like these energy systems create societies full of conflict. Everybody's in a rush. Everybody's scared. And, you know, those things are leading towards decisions that lead to more fear and more frustration, more uncertainty. And I think the wellness space and the fact that I think I saw this, that meditation is up like 2,500% or something. If you look at the Global Wellness Index, or the global wellness industry as an organization, they do research on this sector. And yeah, we need things that can drive wellness. We need people to feel more of that, you know, balance and operate from there. I think that if people feel balanced, they'll make balanced decisions regardless of what they're hearing from news and media and politics, and even our response to sound and color. Like that's a whole nother subject, is just how the media impacts our moods, which impacts the way we live. And now we're at the point where we're trying to figure out is what's impacting us even truthful. And so it's fallen on everybody to really identify, or at least my perspective is, you know, you can listen to anything, and media fills in the gaps in the reality that we create for ourselves. And so it might just come down to whether or not you watched The Cosby Show or Fresh Prince or Saved by the Bell, and which one dictated how you behaved in the world. So yeah, it's a part of it has been about helping people be more aware of where they're at, and also be aware of what's impacting them. And that's kind of the direction that we want to take the business, in terms of helping people navigate these types of emotional journeys, to at least find a happier, like for those seeking a happier existence or a happier experience. You know, if we can help them guide them there, which is what we seem to have success with so far, that's what we want to keep doing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it's interesting that piece that you hit on of not just how media kind of fills in the gaps, but how much it can be sort of that fear-driven piece, as well as the sort of the sensation and the different ways that it impacts our moods. What for you has been, I'm trying to think how to put this right. Maybe I'll skip that part for right now. I've got to let it gestate a little bit more. Instead, I'll ask for around that third sort of piece, and then I have a question that comes from there. But being an entrepreneur as a dad, because like I'm right there with you, and like what's that journey been like for you? How do you try to balance those things? Because it feels like in either of those roles, you've got 100 things a day that you need to get done, of which you have to pick like the 5 that you're going to most be able to actually hit.
Yeah. So when COVID first kicked in over here in Burbank, it was just my wife and I having to keep both of the kids at home. Now that there's, we've evolved a little bit, and there's some scenarios that give my wife and I a little bit more time. So when COVID first kicked in, I think I had to make peace with getting 4 hours of work a day. Like my wife would be in the office in the morning, I'd have the kids, and then we'd switch at lunchtime. We were able to, as the school year started, now we just have like a 2 hour interruption in the middle of the day. And so I'm up to 4.5 hours a day. And so it's really about finding a way to just make peace with getting as much done as you can. Even sort of taking a mental approach to the day, saying like, I'm going to get these 3 things done. These are the 3 most important things. So priorities become a big part. I think that in the space of working with consciousness and dealing with, a 6-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl who see home as a place to play, and then home turns into the place that they have to like do work in, or it becomes like the home is a place of freedom, and then it becomes the place of restrictions. It's challenging for them. And working in the consciousness space, I'm very aware. I'm way more aware now of like how traumas that happen at a young age impact you like all the way down the line. So minimizing trauma is like clearly like a priority for me, and helping my kids develop a perspective that I didn't have about how to manage emotions. Like it's great that social emotional education is a part of the curriculum out here. It's tough that they don't get that through the online system. So it is challenging. I think a lot of parents, when we were kids, like I pushed myself through school. My son is like not pushing himself. My wife pushed herself through school, and so we don't know how to get our son motivated. However, he's really smart. It's just brought more awareness around how the education system's set up. There's a lot of kids that don't sit still but are still really smart. Maybe they can learn through physical activity, but we need to get there. That's another development stack that I've got lots of ideas on, and I'll pursue it when I get the resources. But there's just so many inefficiencies that can be addressed with technology and a healthier perspective. So being the parent has to be the priority for me. I don't like working when I need to be around my kids, so I do aim to keep that separate. I've just found it it's been challenging, and I've learned a lot through it. And so I try to gravitate towards the lessons. The whole thing about how you're experiencing, what you experience around you is a reflection of what's going on inside of you. So I kind of just look at my kids, and when you're misbehaving, I'm like, all right, what do I need to change? And will that have an impact? So it's like, it's an experiment.
I hear that. Yeah, no, and I remember about the piece before that struck me, but it was when you were talking about how we develop our defenses around with the media and such. And so there's sort of a cynicism that gets built in as kind of a protection that's there. It's tricky because then we're trying to connect with each other as well. And there's this just basic human trust, collaboration, connection piece that's there. And it's tricky. And I think especially in that entrepreneurial space, when you have that, plus you then also have the need to, to take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt and look at how you approach the different pieces. I can't wait. I look forward to us finding a time to have a conversation about that educational piece too, because we've got a little guy who very much like kinesthetic is his mode of learning, and that's hard in COVID times.
Yeah.
If you were able to go back to when you were just thinking like, there's something to this binaural beats thing, to looking at how I'm doing my emotional processing, I'd like to get that out into the world. What advice would you give to you just beginning out on the entrepreneurial journey?
Definitely strategize a means for income with your MVP. I was developing my MVP, and there's just a lot of thoughts. I've done a lot of this as a solo founder, and I had the fortune to work with a really good company in Los Angeles called Rootstrap. Back then they might have been called Neon Roots. They're going through sort of a name change, but if you look them up now, Rootstrap, there was a developer there named Neville Reeves, and he was just the most mindful person that I met. Like maybe I was just lucky that I met him, because I wasn't coming in with a lot of like money for their development company, but he's like, we need this app. And he advised me to consider, a means of, having a back end, creating profiles, charging people for the access. And I was in research mode. It's like, I'm going to create an MVP that proves the efficacy of sound as a healing modality, and then I'll get the investment. It took me until last week to finally release that white paper to prove my point. So we'll see if the investment comes shortly after or what. However, the amount of time it's taken to get to this point has made me want to tell everybody that you want to validate your approach to your product, to your business. You might just want to consider sustainability as a part of that equation in the very beginning. Sustainability without income that's been like the emotional journey. And I'm grateful for my wife. She supported the business. She supported me. She's dealt with my emotions. I think I married the happiest person I ever found because my soul knew that I was about to go through something. So super grateful for her. And it's hard creating a business when helping people. For me, people feeling better is the priority, and charging people for that has always felt awkward. I have come across the concept, obviously, that people need to have agency and they need to take some steps and they need to commit to something. So putting a price tag on a product can be helpful. However, sustainability is kind of that's it. If you can't continue to do what you do, then it is what it is. And so I've had to find ways to navigate without having that as a support system. And I don't recommend it for anyone.
Yeah, I definitely hear that part as well, both of those parts. And it's interesting how you have this there's this confluence, it feels like, often between, on the one hand, a lot of people who that's where their passion is on actually the healing and the improving and getting that out there. And the trick is feeling like, I feel bad charging for that, and so I go under because I don't sustain myself in being able to help. And then you've got that other wave where it's like, I smell money in here somewhere or other. There's something to invest in, and like maybe it'll do good for people. That's great, but finding that balance place in the middle of that kind of Venn diagram where it's sustainable and can be profitable, and the focus is like that laser focus on actually making things better. And
I think for me, it was probably my dad dying of cancer. It was probably realizing that a lifetime of chronic pain broke my back by 30. It was all the stats out there on just how detrimental chronic diseases are for the economy, for our healthcare system, for our way of life, like, human sustainability. And so for me, it's been part of the mission. The big part of the mission was educating people on, one, that sound can help, but two, that emotions and thoughts are really, really crucial. And and that continues to be the priority. Making it sustainable is doable, especially now that I've like traced, thought back a little bit on what I could do different. And so it really is just like finding a balance, whether it's, a personal balance, a business balance. You've got to find equilibriums or things don't survive.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about how it's in so many different directions, it's a crazy time right now. I'd love to know, like, where does that look like from where you sit, and like, what's this about, and where do you fit into that and fit into what's all going on in the world?
Well, this is where the conversation could get weird.
Excellent. That's where the good stuff is.
So, for me, it's always been about how sound was used in history, the stories about what sound could do. You know, you watch a documentary or a few documentaries about how Egyptian temples were used as healing chambers, and that each different pyramid had a different vibration, and they were connected through tunnels to the place where people actually went to get their healing done. And it was almost like setting up some sort of like spider web of like, you go to this room to get energy from that pyramid, and that pyramid is tied to this frequency, and this frequency is good for helping this particular state of consciousness or mind or body. And I was like, is that legit? And then I mentioned before how the monks have been using this for thousands of years. And I'm kind of losing track on where I was going with this particular train of thought. But remind me again, where were we? Oh, so the weird part. So in understanding how I fit into all of this, it's all been a surprise. I knew I needed something, and I understand that I gotta go. My son is leaving for school. And so gravitating towards let me get my train of thought back. So how I fit in was weird because as I'm exploring sort of like what's going on in ancient Egypt, like I'm getting more curious, like I'm having thoughts and imaginative experiences about whether it's subconscious impact from the things I've been studying. I haven't mentioned, or maybe it's mentioned elsewhere, but I started to write a book. It was a young adult, like sci-fi fantasy. I was into writing. I moved to LA because I wanted to get into a more creative space after sort of getting disenfranchised with the finance industry. And I started to, and my friends were asking me to write, projects too. And I wound up studying Socrates and how he was going to these places to learn different things that they didn't teach elsewhere. And that opened up the Elysian mysteries. And so I was super curious about the mysteries and where they came from. And the stories of that was going back to Egypt. And, when you're looking into sounds in the solfeggio scale, you get introduced to Pythagoras. And Pythagoras, he learned a lot of stuff from people that went to Egypt. And I think he went to Egypt too. And so what is all this coming from Egypt? And Egypt's talking about, oh, is this place called Atlantis? And I'm like, what's that about? and all that was very fascinating. And growing up in the Bible Belt and seeing the connections between, history and religion and sort of how cultures evolve, and wondering what this stuff was about Atlantis, and just that, it seems, and there's just so much more available now than when the internet first came out, because a lot of people are really looking into this, and to see that there was like a culture there that essentially seemed to spawn all the native cultures around the world. Again, being African American in the South, slavery is a big topic. You wonder how it happened, why it happened, was it good, was it not? In the South, they'll tell you that slavery was, it's written in the Bible, so it's supposed to be there. And still, I wondered why. And so I continue, this is me personally, just digging and digging and digging as to like what did happen a long, long time ago. And it does seem to show that there was, a culture that believed in empowering people to understand nature. And there was a culture that was the complete opposite. And that seems to be a big source of the wars that were fought. The players involved, I don't know if I could talk about like gods and goddesses and who did what, but ultimately like those conflicts shaped how humans evolved. And the lessons that they shared still exist, and they continue to guide my understanding of at least what happened, and from there pick and choose what facts seem to pop up the most, what seems to be like the truth within all these stories, and what was their motivations, and ultimately it's all about finding a way to get past the conflict. Like, is whatever they were fighting about really anything that we need to be fighting about now? Like, even internally, is the one thing that I really want versus the thing I'm currently doing? Like, do I need to feel separation between those two things? Do I need to, like, is stress necessary? I mean, sure, it might be for evolution, but when it comes to just wanting to like enjoy yourself, your life, your moment, like stress should be something that we can turn on and off. So in any case, I started to have my own personal experiences, meditating a lot, just exploring consciousness in the variety of ways that we can explore it. And feeling more of a connection to Egyptian figures like Thoth and Ra and you know, the connection between like Thoth and Hermes and like what's that about. So there's just a lot of mysteries with a lot of connections, and that seemed to really speak to me about how, you know, when I was studying about sound and I was talking about color psychology, and like what were the links between those, and it was really just mathematics along the electromagnetic spectrum, and to see how, you know, color dieting also falls in line with color therapy, and mathematically we can get down to sound, therapy, psychology, I kind of use them interchangeably, but ultimately there's just so many connections that explain, you know, how things evolve, how things grow in nature, how humans evolved, and how we respond to nature, and how there's all these different places that you can go where nature can have a positive impact on your health. And all those connections just spoke to me in terms of these mathematical frequencies are impacting us along the entire experience, and we can tap into them, whether it's by looking at color or the sun or light or the sky or eating vegetables or specific fruits or just walking on the beach or grounding yourself, like all up and down. There's something to do for everything, for every, you know, everywhere you feel out of balance, there's a way to get back into balance. And when you're living in a city or you're at home and you need that immediately, like Euphoria offers a taste of it, and you can listen to that as long as you want. But the truth is, you know, we've got to change how we interact with the environment, and that's just a really big thing to do. So yeah. I kind of saw that all that could lead to, you know, a reason for a business to make that positive change, and to find a way to do it where we can give back as much as people give to us, so that way we can create that sustainability, and I can feel good being a CEO that's not worried about greed.
Yeah. So it's a whole different way of not only doing business, but looking at what it is that you're doing. And I mean, especially as you say, like in a culture where everything is so commoditized, and like, you know, is it a Pop-Tart or an apple or a pancake you put in your mouth is seen as A, B, and C, rather than like, these are totally complicated, very different things that we put into our body that become us. And yeah, kind of tapping into that piece. So yeah, it's amazing talking with you, Brandon. This is so many different things to think about, and I'm leaving feeling inspired from this part. If you have what would be a question that would be the question you wish I would have asked, or the thing that you would love to be able to talk about that we didn't quite fit in?
Well, the next time we chat, you know, consciousness, evolution, sort of connecting. Like I'm curious as to how many people out there are actually curious about their soul, or connecting to it, or understanding it, or recognizing the link between, or how we can tap into it to understand our purpose. And I feel that that path is how people access their genius. I think everybody has genius in them. I think everybody has the capacity to do more than they imagine. And I'm curious as to how many people are curious about that. I feel like it is super valuable if you want to be on that path. Me personally, I see it as an incredibly valuable path, especially for addressing a lot of the concerns about how we live with each other. I haven't experienced the demand that I thought I would, and it might just be because, like, clearly, like, COVID is wrecking everybody sort of emotionally, mentally, physically, and there's demand for solutions around that. I'm curious as to how willing people are to dig into the source of their frustration and find those solutions. So yeah, I just keep sharing what I share in hopes that people get inspired to look into things for themselves, and you know, join us on our crazy journey.
One last question I'll ask you on that, just because it's such a fascinating piece for me. As you're exploring into those areas a little bit more, are you finding, like, kind of your sangha or your community of people who are also, you know, whatever it is they're working on, that's the zone they're in, that's what they're working on?
Absolutely. It's because of you know, transformative technology and the work of all the people there. You know, Nicole Bradford is such a beacon. in terms of recognizing that, 2 years ago, I think we met a year ago.
Yeah.
3 months before we met, I felt like I was completely alone in the world. I felt like I was the only one trying to build a business that could help people and society and businesses all at the same time. And the transformative tech community is thousands of people just like me. We all have ideas. We've all been through experiences. We're all creating, and we're all open to co-creating, and we're all figuring out how to do it collectively. We all feel like we're making it up as we go, because the economic systems, the entrepreneurship path through VCs, fundraising, it's not like it was. So you can't just go to your local bank and get a loan. It's like, now it's like you got to put your house up if you want to, create a solution for the world. And you're just like, I want to. My wife wants to. And so it is, that's the challenge, is figuring out how, and we all face that challenge, and we face it together, and we support each other. And I'm grateful for you, Daniel, for having me here, having these conversations, getting the word out there, giving people a place to find, start just more places to find solutions. I think that right now Google is our best bet for saying, like, this is how I'm feeling, who can help? And for me, that's been like a 5-year process of digging into what really works. And I think that we can accelerate that, especially with the technology that you're doing. I mean, when people can start doing like more with VR and gaming experiences that are designed to actually empower them and support them. It's just that we've been creating stuff that is harmful. And now that we are more aware of how it harms people, I think we can, we just need more people to create, with their heart. Yeah. And and this is definitely the community. Trans tech, the wellness industry, these are people that create with their heart, and want people to feel better. And we're not driven by money. We just know that we need it. And so it's been really uplifting to feel that community. And I recommend it to everybody down in Los Angeles. And it's going global. There's this company called Scale Health, and they're all focused on health tech and wellness tech, and they're opening in different cities because they're just trying to connect the healthcare system to the government systems, to the entrepreneurial systems, and build efficiencies once they've sort of gathered all that. So lots of reasons for optimism, and that's why as entrepreneurs we have to be patient. It's our best tool. For me, maybe that's just been the lesson that I've needed to learn. And so I practice it. I use my app. I ground as often as I can, and just maintain balance.
That's great. I want to open it up. We've got Carolina and Nemo here. I don't know if either of you have any questions you want to ask Brandon.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, I was wondering, what was it that drew you to binaural beats, and do you have a background in music that kind of influenced that exploration, or is it more from like a cognitive side that you were approaching it?
Well, I will let me answer it this way. When I was trying to figure out how to make the discs in my back grow back, I looked at a lot of things, and a lot of things didn't make sense. I did grow up. I took band in high school and middle school. I played the saxophone. I was in the jazz band. There were people way better than me. But still, like, being around music, I learned as much as I could. And so when I started to see that binaural beats were able to like shift me into healing states like meditation, sleep, and relaxation, it wasn't far-fetched. Or at least it wasn't too hard for me to manipulate, to explore, to see if I could replicate it. And because binaural beats made sense to me, and I felt the effects, and I continued to feel those effects, it just led me to this path of understanding sound more and more. So as far as like the cognitive approach, I'm not sure if that's what you meant, but it was because I recognized it, I could experience it, I could feel it, I could replicate it, that it felt like it was very reliable. I like to say it felt sound, as in reliable, but you know, I had also taken biology of hearing at Brown University. And, you know, that was kind of a trigger in terms of recognizing how all the different hair cells in your ear respond to different frequencies. I had friends who were struggling with tinnitus, and that's the ringing in the ear. And I was trying to find approaches to address that. And so for me, manipulating sound was easy. I still need way more resources. There's way more that we can do with sound. And there's been other people out there studying how organs respond to specific frequencies, or the Schumann resonance. That's another one I haven't mentioned, but we have Schumann resonances on Euphoria as well, because one, I've seen how, you know, without me proving it, I've seen other people prove it, but how, or constantly repeat it, but how the earth vibrates at this frequency of 7.83 hertz. Again, that's below the hearing level. So you can use binaural beats to get there. And when you create that vibration, DNA replicates. And that's what people have found a lot of success with when it comes to recovering from injuries and pain. And I'm trying to get it in front of the NBA, like, you know, stop feeling the stress, recover faster. You know, if Klay Thompson hears about this, like, you know, you want to play this season? But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that gives me a good overview kind of where you were coming from and where you're hoping to go with it. Thanks.
Sure.
Can I ask now?
Yeah.
Ivan, the first, thanks so much. I really love like what you were talking about. I like personally have healed myself, not through music, like through meditations, things like that. So like I love the topic. And I would like to ask you, I don't have any iOS, so is in case you have any ETA for launching the Android. I would love to try it out, your application. It's just that. That's my question.
Yeah, ASAP. That has been the #1 priority since October of 2017. My apologies, it's taken this long. And yeah, you know, something else for developers. It's interesting how like co-creation is like a crucial process. Like there's people with ideas and who can organize, and then there's people with the skill sets to develop. There's people with the skill sets to market and promote. And as an individual, like I've been good at organizing and strategizing. I'm not a developer, so it's been very slow in even getting Euphoria onto a web app. Of course, like with just one volunteer, like I am constantly in search of a CTO in case you come across any. But ultimately, this stuff is easy to implement. It's just a matter of acquiring the skill sets to do it. So is it Carolina or Carolina? In any case, I will make sure Daniel lets you know. You'll be the first person. I'm going to tell Daniel the first time. You'll be the first person I tell.
Please.
Daniel to let Carolina know.
And I'll let you know, both Carolina and Nemo are dynamite members of the Banging Rocks team on the development side. So we can talk. That's awesome.
Awesome. We'll work together soon, right?
That's right.
Awesome.
That's exactly right.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you for taking the time. It's so great to talk to you, Brandon. I'm looking forward to our next conversation and it being not so long in between them. It's
anytime you're ready. I'm excited. I like the way you do it, Daniel.